Excited to have Michael Puhle here today, all the way from Australia. Thank you, Michael. Really appreciate it, man.
Hey, it's my pleasure, mate. Thanks for making the time.
Yeah, you bet. So me and you met, boy, it was almost 2 years ago, exactly, just shy of 2 years at Seal Fit Kokoro, right?
That's true. I think I was just about to get on the plane to head over stateside. So yeah, it must have been 2 years ago.
Yeah, that was, and I don't think we really probably said more than two words to each other till maybe the last 3 or 4 hours of the event, but felt like I got to know you at a pretty deep level through those 52 hours that we had together. So
Yeah,
it's good to see you, man. Good to talk to you
yeah.
again. Uh,
Good to see your face, man, and of course, good to see what you're doing as well, which is great.
yeah, absolutely. And I've been watching you as well. So you inspire me, seeing what you've been doing and what you've been up to. And that's what I want to get into. So first question I love to ask all my guests is, so the name of this podcast is the Championship Leadership. And I'm just always curious, what do you think of, what comes to mind for you when you hear that term, when you hear championship leadership? What do you really think about? Maybe who do you think about? Yeah.
I think those two terms, it gives me two ideas. I've had the privilege of listening to a couple of your podcasts already, just to see what you're doing, see what it's about. And I think there's two sides to that. You've got the first side where the idea of being a leader in a championship scenario, right? So you're taking a bunch of really highly performing, highly intelligent, and highly talented people and being the leader for them and taking them to a championship of some sort. But then the second type, and this is probably where I set in, would be being a championship leader. So being an amazing leader. They're the thoughts that I get when I hear championship leadership.
Yeah, I love it. So who are some of those champion leaders that you've had throughout your life that have molded you, shaped you, guided you, to who you are today?
I'm really fortunate, Nate, in that there's been a few in my life. So it's funny, the people that you reflect on when you are older, that you perhaps didn't realize at the time that they were leading you in the right direction. Right? The first one that comes to mind for myself is my nan and pa. So not my parents, but my mum's side.
Yeah.
Funny enough, I didn't really have deep conversations with pa when he was alive. But when I reflect on, some of the lessons that I learned from him and some of the attitudes and behaviors that he showed to his bigger family, you realize that you learn things from these people by osmosis, almost, by following their example as opposed to being taught. And then from there, I was fortunate in that I played a lot of elite sport. So growing up, so I'm not sure what the equivalent is in the States, or maybe perhaps it's what it's called, but we have state rep sides, national rep sides, things like that in different sports. So I played basketball and Australian rules football growing up. And I was really fortunate to have good coaches. And I think that's a real key for people. Even when I get to, what I'm doing now, I deal a lot in the corporate world and do a lot of kind of leadership, behavior, cultural stuff with them. And you can tell the people that have had a sporting upbringing. You can tell the people that have played in a team, that have been around good leaders. And for me, there are a couple of people, a guy named Richo, who was one of my first footy coaches. Big shout out to him. And a guy named Billy Hopkins, who was one of my first basketball coaches. And I just, anytime something kind of challenging happens, I can think of lessons that I learned from them.
Yeah.
So they're key leaders. And then the final one, mate, is of course my father. I reflect on that now, in that perhaps some of all of his lessons weren't the best, but I learned from what not to do as well as what to do. So he was a pretty good leader in my life.
Yeah, that's powerful to say that. I think we're pretty similar. As I listen to your answers, I grew up athlete, playing a lot of sports, and one of the greatest leaders, that I think of, and probably didn't think of as much as a leader, was my grandfather, my mom's dad, and just an amazing man. And I learned so much from him, and he will pop into my head all the time when there's different situations that come up, or when I'm even raising my kids or teaching them, and I just think of him and who he was as a man, and so that was a big one for me. And then to hear you talk maybe a little bit more about not necessarily always learning from the people that impact you because of the great leader they were, the great characteristics they had, but maybe from people on how not to do certain things. And, you know, my father, my real father, I was just on a podcast earlier today and I was talking about, he's been coming into my life a lot lately. I think it's because
Gotta listen to that.
Yeah, I don't know. Like he was never there. So I've never thought, like, I've gone long periods of time without ever even thinking about him. And lately it's just been like, it's been present a lot in the last month. And my kids are getting to the age where they're starting to ask, like, you don't have a dad? Where's your dad? He was never there. Like, trying to make sense of it. Right. And so I just say that because it's like, I've definitely became who I am because of that experience. So I guess in a way that really definitely has shaped me as a leader as well. And yeah, so it's interesting when you think about that. And then, you know, coaches, right? The coaches we've had, the coaches I've had, like, you just know, I don't know, you talk about what is a leader, right? And for a lot of different people, you can define it in a lot of different ways. But I think the coaches that I've had that have just been amazing and great coaches, great leaders, you know really quick, or that's been my experience, like, you just know that this man is a strong leader. And there's just something about them, how they carry themselves. And you just know that they are going to be successful in whatever it is that they do, whether they were in the business world or in athletics. Has your experience been similar to that? When you're around a strong leader, you just kind of know, you just have this sense or feeling about it without.
I think you always pick something up from them, don't you? You always get some kind of vibe. But I also think that equates to whether or not you kind of buy into what they buy into, right? If you believe what they believe, then you get that feeling and you get that notion that they'll help you lead through whatever it is that you're doing or you're going to help guide them. One of the best parts, and I think it ties in well there, and you know, you're talking about your grandfather as well and how he presented himself to the family, and I saw that in mine. He was very quiet, but he was always at the head of the table, always enjoying himself. And I think sometimes that's some of the best leadership, is that you only say what's needed to be said. And the people that know, and the people that don't, well, they don't need to. And there's some of the best leadership I've been around is that idea of the kind of the cream rising to the top, right? Even by example, our Kokoro, you slowly see people drop off. I remember there was a gentleman who had done one before in our group, in our class.
Yeah.
And I remember like the first evolution, everyone's like, who's going to be, they said, who's going to be your leader? And so we said him, he's done it before, like he can do it.
Right. Yeah.
And reflecting on that now, like
I remember that moment. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's reflecting on that now, like I almost remember seeing hesitation in the faces of the instructors, of the coaches, right? Because they knew, like, okay, well, yeah, maybe he's done it before, but just because you've done something doesn't mean you're the best leader.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to it. And over those 52, 56, I think, by the time you and I got home after everything that happened, it was probably a good 60 hours.
Yeah.
After the 60 hours, you kind of saw the people that just floated to the top, led, and became leaders that way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. And yeah, what you just said. So just because you've done something before doesn't mean that you are a great leader, right? Yeah, I mean, and especially inside of an experience like Kokoro. And for those of you that don't know what Kokoro is, check out Seal Fit Kokoro and take a look. There's some videos and you get a quick glimpse of what it's all about. But it's led by Navy SEALs, some great leaders, some great men that have done a lot of great things, and they push you and kind of simulate a piece of what actual Navy SEALs go through when they're on their journey to become a Navy SEAL. But yeah, so tell the audience here a little bit more about yourself and your story and how you've gotten to where you are and how you've kind of gone through your journey as a leader and leading others. Yeah,
it's funny that you I never really reflect on what I'm doing with Words with Oz as being a leader. Obviously, it is at some point, but a lot of the time when you're in the game, you don't see it that way. So Words with Oz is a company that I've started that inspires the world to be more ambitious. So I've got a belief, from the things that I went through growing up, that there's a lot of talent in the world, but people aren't truly pushing that talent to what we can achieve. For a really obvious example, there's not enough Elon Musks of the world, doing the aiming to go to Mars. Like we're just not. There's so many people that are happy to sit somewhere between average and mediocre. So Words with Oz is all about inspiring them. I do that through a few different ways. I've got similarly to you, I've got a podcast. I also do some online coaching with a webinar series, and then I've got live talks. Now the live talks are my favorite. They're my jam. I spend some time in front of the community, which is a free talk I put on every now and then. And then I also get into the corporate world and get in front of people, get face to face, and get really rowdy for people that ask for it and need it. So that's where the leadership comes in, I think, because I'm just doing what I do. I've always felt like I'm a good coach. I've always had a logical way of explaining things and getting the best out of people, and now it's in a way where I get to go in and lead some pretty high performing teams. So that's what I'm doing now. I once was. I've had a few careers, and so it's an interesting story of how I got to this one. Because if I reflect back on 16-year-old Michael, I think you kind of always knew what you wanted to do, and perhaps you just didn't, funnily enough, have the right leadership back then to tell you to go after that thing that you were passionate about, or that thing that you could feel deep down in your gut that you deserve to do and that the world needs from you. So I had a few different careers. I sold real estate over in the Middle East, over in Dubai, and then I came back and I was a lawyer in Queensland, which is a northern state here in Australia, and in Sydney. So yeah, corporate law. Until one day I lost 2 family members in the same year. That was my father and my sister, and it just was a proper wake up call to say, "What are you doing? Why are you on this path that everyone else says you should go down?" I'm sure you can imagine the scenario. And
yeah.
Go get a degree, go get a decent job, 6 figures, a couple of years out of uni, so on and so forth. But just because society says you should do it, doesn't, it has no inkling on whatsoever as to whether or not you're going to be fulfilled by it. So I handed my resignation in. Took a bit of a bonus payment, took a year off, and worked out exactly how I was going to go about it. Started Words with Oz pretty shortly thereafter, and now I'm 2.5 years in and running my own company.
How old are you?
Just turned 33.
33. Okay. So how do you end up selling real estate in Dubai, first of all?
I was fortunate enough to go see a Robert Kiyosaki seminar when I was 16.
Okay.
So essentially from there, I was going to go become a pretty massive real estate investor.
Yeah.
I did pretty well. I bought my first property at 18, bought another one about 2 years later, and 1 year after that.
Okay.
So I was in that real estate world. I'd traveled previously to Dubai and seen the boom, seeing what was going on there. And I thought, what, I'm pretty good with the gab. I'll be honest with you. I thought in my head, I can manipulate people pretty well. That's probably the negative side of my coaching abilities coming out, or positive, depending on who you are, I suppose. But I went to Dubai and then put those skills into practice and started selling sand.
Okay. And then you became a lawyer. Yeah, I remember. I don't know if you remember. It was at Kokoro. We were all lined up, and we were getting ready to go on the ruck up the mountain. And one of the coaches was asking what we were doing, and I remember you talking about being a lawyer at one time and a bunch of other stuff. And you were, that was 2 years ago. You were 31 at the time. Like, you've done a lot in a short amount of time, and a lot more than. Like we kind of been talking about, a lot more than what most choose to do, right? You talked about graduating from the university and kind of settling, not necessarily living this fulfilled life, which is interesting because I just wrote a blog about fulfillment versus achievement, and just that had been present for me here recently too. And just truly finding what fulfills you, not just doing things and accomplishing things and achieving things just to achieve them, but to truly follow something that's going to fill you up. But yeah, I remember just thinking like, wow, that's inspiring. Again, we still hadn't really even talked to each other at that time, but I remember that moment when he was going around and kind of asking us what we do, and you were telling that. So it's good to hear that backstory a little bit. But let's talk. I think there's a lot. So you talked about, going and being timing and selling sand and air in Dubai and basically seeing what was going to happen. But it's one thing to see, like there's a lot of people that you'll talk to that, like McDonald's is a very popular name brand franchise across the world. And, even my grandpa was one of those. It was like, I had the opportunity to buy McDonald's, like when they first started, and kind of always wishing he would have, right? Like having the opportunity to buy this stock when it was super cheap, or, basically not taking action or making a decision to go and listen to your gut and put yourself out there to go after what you want, and kind of really just playing it safe through life, and then you talk about, when you lost 2 family members in the same year, how that was the eye-opening moment for you, but also just coming back to having not only the vision to see what was going on in Dubai, but yet at a very young age, actually going and taking advantage of that. And I think to be a championship leader, not only do you have to have the vision, you also have to be willing to put yourself out there and do kind of like when everybody else is going left, be willing to go right and take that chance. And that's what I really see as defining characteristics of a championship leader. And that's interesting to hear you say that, because I think that that's.
Yeah, I find that as well. Even as you were telling that story just then, I did a speech, it would have been about 12 months ago now, at a leadership summit here in Melbourne at the time, and it was for females in finance. So they've got their own kind of women in banking, women in the finance world. And I went and spoke to them, about fear. And I remember telling them a story about one of the ventures I've had at some stage, and Kokora came up, or at least I told them a little bit about that without talking about it too much. And at the end there was a Q&A. And one of the ladies says to me, or asks me, why would you do that? Obviously, because I told the story about Kirk. Those listeners that don't know, we had a classmate that we lost on that trip. And I told a brief story about Kirk, and she said, "Why would you do that? Why would you put yourself in that situation?" And it took me a while, and my first reaction was to kind of rebut her, to kind of be a bit defensive about it, like, "Oh, why wouldn't you?" And so I took a couple of deep breaths, and I answered another question, to be honest. And then I came back to her and I said, "I've had some time to think, and it's because that's what leaders do. They find the uncomfortable situation. They find the thing that's going to make them grow. Now, if you're sitting in this room and you don't think that Kokoro is the right thing, or you don't think that next uncomfortable situation that you need to be in is something for you to do, well, then I seriously question whether or not you're going to be a leader in the future." And that's what making those decisions and taking those chances is all about. When I was about 14, I had a coach named Matthew Richardson, and he was I still use this every single day, and it was funny. He would have said it once probably in the entire year of football, but I still use this every single day. And he said to me, "Decide and do." Like when you're on the footy field, the ball's there, opponent's there, decide and do. Are you going to go pick it up and hit the opponent? Are you going to wait for the opponent to go and tackle him? But you don't have time to think the decision out too much, do you? I mean, eventually you get your 10,000 hours up and become a bit of a master of the game, and you can make those decisions pretty quickly. But in the moment that I was in, decide and do was so key. And that's the exact same for life. Whether I'm going to go to Dubai and sell real estate, yeah, it's a great idea. Decide and do. Stop talking about it, get it done. Seal fit. I don't know whether you remember the first day, but one of the coaches was like, "Have you been training for this?" And the honest answer was no. Like I train hard all the time, but I didn't say Seal Fit's the end of this goal. Like, there's my training, let's go there. So I said no to him, but it was only a month before Seal Fit that I kind of looked it up. It was like, yeah, that's it, and I'm decide and do. The day I decided to quit law, like it was about 24 hours later that I handed in my resignation. So I really think that's a key aspect to it. You've got to be able to decide and do what you want quite quickly, and the best leaders know how to do that. And the best leaders pivot when they make the wrong decision, which is another conversation altogether.
Yeah, powerful. Decide and do. Yeah, I talk about decisive execution, which is another way I believe of saying decide and do. There are moments when you're just going to have to make a decision and go, and whether it's the right one or not, We definitely know the wrong one is to not do anything at all. So yeah, that's powerful. What was the response when you told that group of the female audience that was in finance that asked you that question? What was the response when you gave that answer?
I could see a few of them nodding, and a few of them came up to me afterwards. There's a bit of a networking moment afterwards. We had a small conversation about it, but there wasn't too much of an answer. To be honest, I think that one person was probably a bit taken back, and may have questioned her in that level. But also, that I was a 30-year-old single male at the time. Of doing those things, and I think some of these ladies are more in your 45, 50, probably have one or two children and are trying to gone back to the workforce and trying to climb that corporate ladder. So two different people. But yeah, there was I'm not sure we're on the same level with that. Having said that, there were definitely people there that were other people that were giving speeches and other people that were at the, probably the managers of the different tables. And you could see their mind ticking over, like, what's the next uncomfortable thing I can do?
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit. You talk about the age difference, and you're still a young man. So am I. I'm 42, but I still feel like I'm a young guy.
I'm sure your biology clock probably sits down the 18, 19-year-old age looking at you.
Yeah. By some of the things that I do, that's for sure. What is it? What's your experience? Because I think it's natural for most to have this mindset of maybe I can't be a leader because they put all these parameters around it. One of them being potentially age, right? I remember when I was lieutenant in the Army, and a butter bar, what we call the butter bar, was a second lieutenant, and I had to tell this guy that was in our unit, showed up for drill, and he didn't have his hair cut and he just looked like a mess, right? And this guy's like a grown man, probably got grandkids. And here I am, I'm like 25, and, telling this guy that he has to go and be a leader, do my job. And there was some resistance around that, and probably some stories of like, I'm 25, this guy's 63. Who am I to really go and like confront this guy? But it was the right thing to do, and especially as in the position that I was, because there's a difference between having a position or a title and truly being a leader. Like, you can have the position and title and not be a leader. You can have this level of leadership to where they're like, well, technically you outrank me, so that makes you a leader, but not really a championship leader. And so I just remember that, and so that kind of comes into play here. What do you do? What have you experienced, if anything, around, being a young guy, but definitely being a leader, coaching, going out and talking to corporations, bringing your experiences? Just, you can see it through our conversation, just from the young age, how you've obviously seen yourself as a leader and one that's just going to go out, decide and take action, and not wait for anyone else, or not even wait for any, you're not waiting for permission from anybody, which is rare in today's day and age. So yeah, can you talk to that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, the first thought that comes to mind is similar to when we're talking about experience. Both age and experience are factors for leadership, but they're definitely not the factor. Just and similarly to what you said, just because someone labels you, he's the manager, he's the captain. Like, I've seen plenty of situations where that captain is not the leader of the team. So labels to me mean nothing, and definitely an age and experience are a factor, but mean little. And the thing for me that comes up there is whether or not, I suppose it comes back to what I said at the start, that idea that the cream rises to the top. If I've got a situation where someone dismisses me because of age, look, that's a loss to them in the future. Or perhaps I'm not the right fit, which is fine. Maybe they've got it sorted and they don't need my assistance, which I think if you're the type of person that closes off to that, then you're the type of person that closes off to a lot of things. But having that situation where age becomes a factor, I normally would just say, give it time. If you believe in what you do and you do the right thing and you do it as well as you can, you'll succeed. You'll rise to the top, and then your championship leadership will come out.
Yeah, that's great. Well put. We talked about vision of a leader and having that vision, but not only having it, taking action on it. What's the big vision for you inside of what you're building and what you're doing? You made that shift and you're like, I'm not doing this just because, everybody said this is what I'm supposed to do in life, and have really gone out and are doing and living the way that you want to. What's your big vision? Maybe let's say 5-10 years out in the direction.
So look, 5 to 10 years. I'll be looking at having words with Oz in a situation where it's completely passively running. A functioning business at which I'm the head. As far as what I'm doing, I want to get to a point where I've spoken to 100,000 people in a year, in a face-to-face scenario. So whether that's 10 events at 10,000 people, or two large ones or whatever it can be, or 100 small ones, 100,000 people in 1 year. But in my mind, as I said from the get-go, I began it to inspire people to be more ambitious, because I believe that if you live an ambitious life and do it on your passionate purpose and on your values, then you will be fulfilled. If I can inspire just one Richard Branson or just one Elon Musk, if I can inspire just one Michael Jordan, just one kid that didn't have it but could have, and changes the way that he goes, or one adult that has it but didn't realize it. All it takes is one moment to inspire a great person. If I do this for the rest of my life, hopefully I inspire more.
Yeah. Talk to me. What do you really see? What do you look for inside of a leader? Like how do you really define leadership? And especially when you are working with other leaders inside of Words with Oz and the corporations and the training, the coaching, even on an individual one-to-one or a group level that you do, how do you really truly define leadership? I'm always interested in that. We talked about defining a little bit about championship leadership, but what are some of the top characteristics that you really think of, and maybe even you look for when you were out there?
I think the best part about some of the leaders that I've worked with is that they don't know that they're leaders. I mean, they understand that they're running whatever it is that they're running, but they don't come up and say, I'm the leader, follow me. What they do is they act on their behaviors. So let's take the gym that I go to, for example. Awesome gym, I would say best in Sydney, and therefore arguably the best private gym in Australia. Now, the guy that runs it just does what he does. But he's got behaviors, he's got characteristics, and he's got standards, and that's what he acts on. Now, he upholds those standards, and everyone that gathers around him follows those standards. So that's what I see as leadership, is your ability to know vision for where you're going, what's the standard and what's the behavior for me, for my team, for our company, for our country to get there. And then I just do that every single day. And then they just do that every single day. And that is your best leader. Now, there's the side that someone needs to be able to coach, someone needs to be able to navigate all those kind of things. But people learn by example, Nate. People follow. They're not taught. They won't buy into things that they don't see. So if you want to be the best leader, it's about behaving in the way that you want other people to behave, and then they'll follow.
Yeah, amen, man. I talk about it all the time, and living what you teach, especially as a coach and a leader in what I do. And not everybody necessarily follows this, but for me, like, it's very true. And for me, it's like a requirement. If I'm going to be out here coaching and guiding and leading and inspiring and impacting lives and teaching and preaching what we teach and preach, like, I have to live it. I have to be out there doing it. I have to be the standard. And there's one thing. Absolutely. Yeah. Like, just like setting the standard. There's the standard, and then there's like the standard that you are being, right? And so, yeah, I 100% agree with that you have to be out there and you have to be living what you teach. And
I think that integrity angle is huge. It's one of my core values. I mean, and it's a word that's thrown around so much. Pretty much every company I've ever spoken to and said, what are your values? Integrity, the word comes up. Yeah. It gets to the point where it frustrates me, but it's such a great word. It covers so many things, because I'm not big on this may sound unusual, but I'm not big on honesty. And I see integrity and honesty as two different things. Don't get me wrong, honesty is pretty high up there, but
Yeah.
integrity is key. You know, I can trust a thief to be a thief, but if you're a thief, just be the thief. Like, don't be honest with me. I understand that you're a fucking thief.
Yeah.
Have integrity. So that integrity piece there, like as you're saying, you know, everything that you're doing, all the coaching that you're doing, and the standards that you set, don't say you have them and then not. You know, I post a video every morning. Just a cheeky little 1-minute video on Instagram and Facebook, you know, but it gets posted at 4:30 a.m. every morning.
Yeah.
And that's not because I've got an automatic robot that does it. Like, that's because I'm up.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I've pre-recorded it because I had captions and all those kind of things. But
Yeah.
I'm up. I'm looking through which video I want to post that day. You know, and I'm posting it before I go to the gym. You know, 2 hours before the sun's coming up. You know, you've got to be able to live what you set. And there are days when you don't meet that, and they're probably my hardest days. Like, I've got days of conflict where, you know, there's an invoice come in and I've not budgeted correctly, and you're like, you know, so you're hitting that point of running your own business and all that kind of thing, and it shits you, and you hit that conflict. But if I can hit the 80-20 or the 90-10 of being integral to what I say, you know, eventually there'll be a time where people just trust that you hit it all the time, and that's huge. I'm glad you brought that up. That integrity piece is massive.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, how do you define integrity? I think a lot of people struggle defining integrity. I know we have that conversation inside of our events and with our clients, and I'd love to hear. Yeah, how do you define integrity?
The biggest promises that you can make are the promises you make to yourself. So therefore, the worst promises you can break are the promises that you make to yourself. And for me, integrity is not breaking the promises you make yourself, because they're the ones that happen in your head, right? Like, I might tell someone that I'm going to run the marathon next year, but in my head, I might have said, actually, I'm going to run 2, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to run it in 3 hours. Now, that's the promises I've made to myself. And when you break too many of them, yeah, there's a lot of straws in that, you know, that can break a camel's back, and they're pretty huge ones. So for me, integrity is not breaking the promises you make to yourself, or to take away the negative. Integrity is upholding the promises you make to yourself.
Yeah, that's powerful. We phrase it pretty much the same way. We just like be your word, and it's most powerful to be your word to yourself, right? Because, like you said, the more you break promises to yourself, or the less that you are your word to yourself. The issue is that you're like, well, no one knows, no one, but you know. And you're right. And it's just going to show and shine in all of the other aspects of your life, and all of the other relationships and interactions that you have with others. Like, it's just going to come out that, like, you're just not a person. You're not even truthful or being your word to yourself. But yeah, that's big for us, is to be your word. And I want to be, and just like you said, I think, you know, 80-20, 90-10, I try to be as close to 90-10 or 100% as I can. As far as, you know, if I say that I am going to do something, like, you can count on me. Like, I want people to, once I tell them that I'm going to do something, they know it's done. It's like it's done already. Like, they can take it to the bank, they can cash it, they can go and spend that. Like, it's as good as done. And then there's the other piece, right, where sometimes you just are not able to do what you said you would do. And that's the other piece of integrity to me, would be just honor your word and own up to it. Like, the second you know that you can't come through on what you said you would, just be like, hey, I know I said I was going to do this, but it's not going to happen. You don't have to get in explanation mode about why or all the reasons, but just to, like, make it right and to come good, or honor your word. Yeah, so I love that, and how you put it.
Communication and trust, hey? So communication and trust are big. They're probably key lessons that I learned from my dad, which are pretty handy. But that idea that people want to trust your word. So if you're going to have to be in a situation where you break it, you know, communicate it and communicate it straight away.
Yeah.
I love that. It's as I said, it makes you feel, gives you a lot of conflict. Having a breaking situation like that, and it doesn't happen often, but when it does, if you're the People will trust you a lot more if you're the type of man that can own it.
Yeah. Yeah. And ideally you're not going around every other day and having to honor your word because you're not keeping it. You know, but at the same time, when those situations come up, you have to honor it and to own it. Hey, let's talk. You know, in my head, I maybe think I already know the answer, but I don't like to do that. So I'm going to put this out there for you. This is a question that I love to ask is what, you know, it seems like for all leaders, right, there's always adversity. There's always things never truly happen the way that we would hope they would, or often they don't happen the way that we had planned or foresee them. And so in your path, what's maybe the one big defining moment where, like, if you would have chose to stay the way you were going instead of taking, you know, the right instead of the left, or going and taking maybe the unpopular, as we would call it, move, what I would think of is really truly taking a stand for yourself, deciding and doing, like, what's a big moment that truly has you where you are today, that if you had not chosen that path could have very easily had you maybe staying where you were at, or doing something completely different?
I think a few phases in life come up for me. One of the key ones, I suppose, for me, the fork in the road, was Dubai. Now, I was working in real estate and had gone through it. So I was living over there during the GFC, so 0809 2010. So the market went from crazy boom to bust, and I had the ability and the history and the real estate know-how to get through that. But at the same time, there were companies falling around down by my side, and I was getting ripped off. So there was a series of commissions that didn't get paid. So I was deciding whether or not to hang around or whether or not to go back to Oz, and I applied for law school, something I was going to do beforehand, but I applied for it at that time. It was just a change. And on the same day that I got the letter of acceptance for law school, I got a job offer from one of Dubai's better and bigger real estate companies. So it was just that decision. Okay, well, am I going back to Oz to do law, or am I staying here on this path? And I think that ability to know, or to adapt, or to decide and do, really kicked in then, and came home. And now I say that because, and I say that specific phase because that was the beginning of my health phase as well. So I could tell you the story about being in law and my sister and my father passing, and then and changing and going out of law. But this actual decision from Dubai was from 27, 28-year-old, 26-year-old Michael, who was drinking and smoking and eating wrong and up late and up early and doing all the unhealthy things, to like coming back to study law, going back to uni, getting my health right, getting my sleep right, quitting smoking, not drinking so much, all those kind of things. So there was a huge change in who I was as a person on that day.
Yeah. Was that a difficult decision for you?
Not really.
No.
Not now that you think about it. Yeah. I was giving up a lot of things, but I was giving up a lot of, and what I mean by that is I was giving up a lot of joy in the achievements of things that don't really matter. Yeah. In the achievement of income, in the achievement of having stupid boy toys, to use on the jet skis on the weekends, Lamborghinis in the desert, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. You can only, and one of the things that I realized is that it's like going out. Once you've been out to a nightclub, 5-6 times, it gets pretty repetitive, and that's the same with all those things that don't matter so much and don't fulfill you. You realize that that's not what you were in search of. So no, the decision wasn't hard upon reflection.
Yeah, it wasn't hard, but you probably didn't choose the easy decision. Could have been very easily to take the money and to take the position, right? And to almost you kind of started over from what it sounds like, but by going back to school, by going back home, but absolutely being able to reflect back and knowing that was the right path for you.
I think you can always see that. Like, obviously, hindsight's 2020, and you can only ever join. Like Steve Jobs said, you can only ever join the dots looking back. So I can see now that it's an easy decision. But even when I reflect on it at the time, everything that was going on in my mind, in my gut, in my life, it was the right decision. It was the decision to make. It probably wasn't the easy decision, but easy decision doesn't make an easy life. You know, hard to throw a cliche at you, it's the hard decisions that make the best life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what, where does Oz come from, by the way? I've been meaning to ask you that.
Yeah, no worries. My middle name is Austin.
Okay.
So Michael Austin Puhle. And my old man always wanted to have his little Aussie, a little boy named Little Aussie.
Yeah.
So AUSSIE. But then when my nieces came along, they couldn't spell that or say that properly, so they just stuck with Uncle Oz, OZ.
I love it. And so it's stuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's great, man. Well, I appreciate your time here, and it's been really good to catch up with you and hear what you have to go and have some great conversation around leadership, championship leadership, and what that truly means to you. How can the people listening here find out more about you, follow you, and see what you are up to?
Yeah, firstly, I just want to say, that I highly appreciate what you're about, Nate.
Yeah.
There was a moment in the camp, like you said, you and I really, we did not talk to each other.
Yeah.
Not for any other reason than we were just getting the job done, right?
And I think we were on different crew.
They set crew by height, right? So you were at one end and I was at the other. Yeah. But then we sat down and we were eating. Do you remember the pancakes and coffee?
Pancakes, man. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
Sure.
And we sat down and we spoke, and it's just funny the people so yourself and Cole are the two that I remember the most, and funnily enough, the two that
the what?
Pretty the two that I remember the most, and the two that are doing some pretty impressive stuff. So
yeah.
I just want to just take some time to say thanks. Thanks for getting involved, and thanks for doing what you're doing. Obviously, I haven't had the chance to be a part of your world as yet. I'm sure I will. Yeah. But I understand there are plenty of people that you're affecting in a positive and ambitious and inspiring way. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, man. I really appreciate it. I do.
If people want to get in touch with me, I would say probably the best thing, obviously podcast listeners, would just Google, just search Words with Oz. I've got a podcast out there. It's just over a year deep. Some pretty impressive guests. I apologize in advance. Most of them are Australian, so the accent, you have to deal with the accent first. Otherwise, wordswithoz.com. And then I've got an online series called 8-Week Life Hack. So 8weeklifehack.com, which is a webinar series, which is kind of the lead in to all the programming that I do. But hey, online, just Google it, Oz, Michael Puhle, whatever, and I'm always available.
Great, and we'll make sure we get that loaded up in the show notes as well, for sure. And truly, thank you, man. It's been an honor to have you here, and I really appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure, mate. Thanks for getting in touch.